The National Growth Fund, a government-backed public offering fund targeting high-tech strategic sectors with tax incentives and downside protection, saw overwhelming demand on its first day, with online subscriptions selling out in under 10 minutes. The Samsung Electronics Union began voting on Friday on a tentative wage agreement that could avert a planned strike, with the deal widely expected to pass if approved by a majority of participating members. The U.S. and Iran are signaling progress in ceasefire talks, but remain sharply divided over the fate of Tehran's highly enriched uranium stockpile and freedom of navigation through the Strait of Hormuz. The government has unveiled a new investment fund aimed at funneling public money into next-generation industries. Now, investor demand surged from day one today, with enthusiasm also boosting the country's tech-heavy junior market. Our Kim Jun-ong has our top story tonight.
A government-backed investment fund offering tax incentives and partial loss protection opened to the public on Friday. The so-called Public Participation Fund gathers investors from the public and distributes them across multiple fund managers. The fund saw overwhelming demand on its first day of sales, with online allocations at major banks and brokerage firms selling out within 10 minutes. Branch offices also saw a rush of subscriptions, with firms expecting remaining allocations to be snapped up quickly. The strong response was seen as being fueled by tax incentives and the chance for ordinary investors to join a policy-driven fund. The program comprises 600 billion won, or approximately $395 million raised from the public, and 120 billion won from state funding. Subscriptions will remain open for 3 weeks through June 11th at banks and brokerages on a first-come, first-served basis. Investors are offered government-backed protection covering up to 20% of losses, along with tax deductions of up to 18 million won. However, only one-time investments are allowed, with funds locked in for 5 years. The initiative is part of the National Growth Fund launched last year to foster future industries. Its feeder funds are set to invest in sectors such as AI, biotech, and semiconductors, industries heavily represented on Korea's tech-focused Gov't-backed market. Enthusiasm over the fund appears to spill over into the junior bourse on Friday, with the Gov't-backed closing up 4.99%. The market also triggered a buy-side sidecar early in the session after its 150 futures index jumped more than 6% in intraday trading.
Anticipation of fresh funds flowing into Gov't-backed sectors such as chips, robotics, and biotech appears to be boosting investor sentiment. The expected inflow is also seen as supportive for market liquidity.
Yet caution remains against excessive expectations, with actual growth and performance from the fund-backed companies needing monitoring. Kim Jun-ong, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung has met with ILO Director General Gilbert Houngbo for a discussion on labor issues today. Hosting him at the Blue House on Friday, President Lee said he hoped that the International Labor Organization would play a major role in the AI era, where the new technology is expected to greatly affect jobs. He also asked for some advice on Korea's labor policy. The ILO chief, who's visiting Korea for its Global AI Hub launching event, highly appreciated the vision and said he hoped that the ILO could work together with Korea to maximize the use of AI on labor issues. He also noted South Korea's major contribution and active participation in the organization. With official campaigning now entering its second day on Friday, rival parties are spreading senior leadership across the country as they battle for support in key electoral battlefields ahead of the June 3rd local elections. Our Moon Hae-ryun has the details.
With 12 days to go until South Korea's June 3rd local elections, both major parties are splitting their leadership across the country to shore up support in key battlegrounds. The ruling Democratic Party is keeping its focus on the Chungcheongdo region, seen as a crucial swing vote. Party leader Chung Cheong-nae visited the area for a second consecutive day, lending his support to candidates in Cheongju and Chungju, while floor leader Han Byung-do worked to solidify support in the traditionally friendly Jeollado region. The main opposition People Power Party is also fanning out across the country. Party leader Chang Dong-yeol canvassed southern Gyeonggi-do province, while floor leader Seo Won-seok headed to Ulsan to rally conservative support in the south. Speaking at a party strategy meeting earlier in the day, Chang took aim at the Democratic Party, calling on voters to use this election to deliver a clear verdict on what he described as the ruling party's arrogance. In Seoul, the mayoral race remains one of the most closely watched contests. DP candidate Chung Won-ho is keeping safety at the center of his campaign, attending a memorial for a 19-year-old worker killed while repairing a platform screen door alone at Kui Station in 2016, before visiting a redevelopment site in Nowon-gu district to press his housing agenda. Incumbent mayor and PPP candidate Oh Se-won, meanwhile, is making his pitch across some of Seoul's most competitive districts. A structural defect discovered at a Samsung station construction site continues to loom large over this whole race, with both camps trading accusations over responsibility. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Unionized workers at Samsung Electronics are now voting on a tentative wage and bonus agreement that could grant some employees hundreds of thousands of dollars in stock-based incentives if approved. Our Park Jun-han has the latest.
A union vote began on Friday for a tentative wage and bonus agreement between Samsung Electronics Union and management, with the outcome set to determine whether the deal officially takes legal effect. The company's labor union launched its electronic vote on Friday at 2:12 p.m., which will continue through to next Wednesday at 10 a.m. The agreement will pass if a majority of eligible union members participate and more than half vote in favor. If the proposal is rejected, labor and management will have to resume negotiations. The tentative 2026 wage deal includes a newly created special management performance bonus funded with 10.5% of agreed business performance earnings, with no ceiling on payouts. Beyond the bonuses, the two sides agreed on a 6.2% average wage increase. They also expanded welfare benefits, including a new company housing loan system worth up to 500 million won, or around $330,000. Brokerage firms estimate Samsung Electronics could post operating profits of around $200 billion this year. If that forecast holds, employees in the memory chip division could receive combined bonuses worth up to $400,000, including both the new special bonus and existing excess profit incentive pay. The special management bonus will be paid entirely in company stock after taxes. Even employees in non-memory semiconductor businesses, including the system LSI and foundry divisions, are projected to receive at least $105,000 in bonuses through the semiconductor division's share profit distribution program. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
U.S. President Donald Trump insists that Iran will surrender its stockpile of enriched uranium to the U.S., which will then be destroyed. Our Jung Hae-rim tells us more.
The U.S. and Iran remain locked in opposition over control of the Strait of Hormuz and Tehran's nuclear program. Speaking at the White House on Thursday, U.S. President Donald Trump said Iran would not be allowed to keep its stockpile of highly enriched uranium and reaffirmed Washington's belief that it will be used for a nuclear weapon.
No, we get the highly enriched. We will get it. We don't need it. We don't want it. We'll probably destroy it after we get it, but we're not going to let them have it.
Iran, however, insists that its nuclear ambitions are purely for civilian purposes. According to Reuters, Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei has directed officials not to allow the enriched uranium, which is believed to total 440 kilograms, to leave the country. Iranian leadership reportedly believes that surrendering the stockpile would leave the country vulnerable to future U.S. or Israeli attacks. Before departing for a NATO ministerial meeting in Sweden on the same day, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said there had been some progress in talks, but called out Iran over its efforts to implement tolls for ships wishing to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. He added that any diplomatic resolution would become impossible if Iran goes ahead with a toll system. Rubio also expressed frustration with European allies who have refused to grant military base access during the conflict.
No one in the world is in favor of a tolling system. It can't happen. It would be unacceptable. It would make a diplomatic deal unfeasible if they were to continue to pursue that. So it's a threat to the world if they were to try to do that. And it's completely illegal. I don't think anyone is shocked to know that the United States and the president in particular is very disappointed at NATO right now.
Although little progress appears to have been made since a fragile ceasefire 6 weeks ago, a diplomatic window is still open. One of the peace talks' central mediators, Pakistan's Army Chief Azim Munir, possibly left for Tehran on Thursday for talks, according to sources from Reuters. U.S. officials indicate that the outcome of Pakistani-led meetings over the coming days will determine the fate of the ceasefire. 정혜림, Arirang News.
Reports say Chinese President Xi Jinping may visit North Korea next week for talks expected to touch on Pyongyang's denuclearization, as Washington and Beijing appear poised to resume their delicate power struggle just days after the U.S.-China summit. Kim Bo-kyung has this report.
Following meetings with U.S. President Trump on May 14th and then Russian President Putin on the 20th, now Xi is expected to travel to Pyongyang as early as next week to meet North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. In a joint statement, China and Russia advocated for a multipolar world and a new type of international relations, with a warning that the world faces the risk of regressing to the law of the jungle.
The world today is far from peaceful, with unilateralism and hegemonism posing profound dangers. The world faces the risk of regressing to the law of the jungle.
We will develop our bilateral cooperation and actively collaborate on international platforms where our colleagues, working closely together, are creating a strong foundation for sustainable development toward a multipolar world.
Now, eyes are on the possibility of Chinese leader Xi's visit to North Korea, with the Blue House releasing a statement on Thursday that the South Korean government is closely watching developments and hopes that exchanges between North Korea and China will contribute to peace and stability on the Korean peninsula. Many sources, including U.S. magazine Time, also reported that China's security and protocol teams recently visited Pyongyang for preparations for a visit, and that Xi Jinping may visit North Korea as early as next week. If Xi Jinping visits North Korea, it will be the first time in 7 years since June 2019. Many are expecting the agenda to include a possible restarting of North Korea-U.S. talks, as China has said that Xi and Trump discussed the peninsula issue during their talks. One expert said Xi could advise Kim to resume talks with Trump.
Even without mentioning denuclearization, a promise to reduce nuclear weapons and gradually lift sanctions could still be very favorable to North Korea. That's why there may be advice to consider meeting President Trump.
However, the expert added that there are still worries that it could strengthen cooperation between China, North Korea, and Russia, as they are seeing right now, as Putin said, a great opportunity to change the U.S.-led global order. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
And now on the export front, overseas shipments of South Korean beauty products saw a trade surplus of over $10 billion for the first time last year. Our Ian Jin covers this milestone.
South Korea's cosmetics exports set a new milestone in 2025. Data released from the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety on Friday showed a trade surplus in cosmetic products exceeding $10 billion. That's an increase of 13.5% from a year earlier. Data also showed that this surplus accounted for 12.9% of the country's overall trade surplus. Korea's cosmetics trade recorded its first surplus in 2012 at $90 million and has since shown steep growth. After a slight dip in 2021, the industry has seen a consistent upward trend in the size of the surplus. While the trade surplus broke the $10 billion barrier in 2025, cosmetics exports first crossed this threshold in 2024. Exports increased by 11.8% in 2025. South Korea's global ranking in cosmetics exports also rose, from third place in 2024 to second place last year, its highest ranking yet. In first was France with $24.3 billion, and in third was the United States with $10.8 billion. The number of countries importing Korean cosmetics reached 202 last year, an increase of 30 countries from the year prior, while South Korea's cosmetics imports decreased by 2.3%. A ministry official stated that South Korea has further solidified its position as a powerhouse leading global beauty trends. The primary product category driving the growth of K-beauty exports was skincare, which accounted for roughly 75% of exports, with facial packs and masks showing the highest growth rates within that category. Record performances in the cosmetics industry are seen to be driven by the also growing global popularity of Korean cultural content, like K-pop and K-dramas. 이은진, Arirang News.
The English version of the South Korean children's song Baby Shark has surpassed 1 billion streams on Spotify. Now that makes Baby Shark the first character intellectual property and children's song to join the platform's Billions Club, according to Pinkfong Company on Friday. The company added the achievement places the song alongside global hits by artists, including BTS, Blackpink, and Taylor Swift. Originally released as part of Pinkfong's children content lineup, the song's virtual success also led its dance video to become YouTube's most viewed video of all time, with more than 16.9 billion views. It's Cannes Film Festival week, and at the 79th edition, attention continues to grow for Korean cinema through standout films and filmmakers. For more on this, we've invited our culture correspondent Jo Young-eun here in the studio. Welcome, Young-eun.
Good evening, Tommy. Great to be here.
Thanks for joining us. Young-eun, it's nearly the end of the Cannes Film Festival week. How has the overall atmosphere been at this year's? And tell us which films are leading the race to, win the prestigious Palme d'Or.
Well, this year's competition is shaping up as one of the most unpredictable. As the 79 Cannes Film Festival enters its final stretch, speculation over this year's Palme d'Or winner continues to grow. According to the Screen Daily Jury Grid, which compiles ratings from international critics on a 4-point scale, most competition titles have received mixed reviews, reflecting what many are calling one of the most polarized Cannes lineups in recent years. While films such as Poland's Fatherland, Japan's All of a Sudden, and the U.S. entry Paper Tiger have emerged as early contenders, critics say there is no still clear frontrunner for the festival's top prize.
This year's competition features many auteur-driven films, suggesting Cannes may be leaning more toward auteur-driven cinema. At the same time, with fewer genre films in competition, their chances of winning could actually be higher than ever.
As the festival concludes with the official closing ceremony on Saturday, the main competition awards, including the Palme d'Or, will be announced following selections from the 8 juries chaired by Korean director Park Chan-wook.
Well, speaking of Park Chan-wook, what does Park's role as the Cannes jury president mean for Korean cinema? I mean, does it signal a broader rise in the global standing of films and Korean filmmakers at this year's edition?
Right. Director Park Chan-wook made history this year as the first Korean filmmaker to serve as president of the Cannes jury. During the festival, Park also received the prestigious medal from the French cultural minister and reflected on how the perception of Korean films have evolved internationally.
Korea is no longer considered a peripheral country in cinema compared to 20 years ago. I wouldn't necessarily say Korean films themselves suddenly entered at the center. Rather, I believe the global film industry has become more open to embracing a wider diversity of films.
Meanwhile, Korean director Na Hong-jin's Hope stands out as the only Korean film invited to this year's main competition section and marks his return to Cannes competition nearly a decade after his last appearance. Blending science fiction and horror, the film is increasingly being discussed as a possible winner, drawing attention for its bold genre experimentation and cinematic style.
It started with thinking about how I could approach a crime story, and then how to make it feel different from my previous work. As I kept turning it over in my mind, the story somehow ended up in outer space.
Some analysts believe the film's unconventional storytelling and genre leave a strong impression on the jury.
I'm really curious to see how far the film maintains the intensity and immersion it builds at the beginning. If it manages to sustain that tension all the way through, I think it could turn out to be a truly remarkable film.
Indeed. Well, talking more about Korean genre films, Young-eun, could you elaborate more on Korean cinema? Why Korean cinema continues to, captivate the audiences and gain more global attention?
Right, Korean genre cinema once again garnered global attention at Cannes through Guntae or Colony, which premiered in the festival's midnight screenings. Widely credited with bringing Korean zombie to global audiences through works like Train to Busan, director Yeon Sang-ho returned with a new film portraying a catastrophic unreleased by rapidly mutating virus. Following its release in Korea on Thursday, Guntae reportedly drew over 200,000 moviegoers on opening day, putting it on track for one of the year's strongest box office openings. International audiences have highlighted the film's signature large-scale global zombie action and distinct Korean genre sensibility.
I think Cannes tends to see Korean cinema through the lens of Asian genre films, as the industry has long developed around movies with strong and distinctive genre identities.
As Korean cinema gains momentum at Cannes, Korean films have maintained a strong presence throughout the years, and it continues to solidify its position as one of the most influential creative industries. Film critics say Korea's strength lies in its ability to merge genre filmmaking and strong social themes and emotional storytelling.
Since the 2000s, Korean cinema has built a strong tradition of genre films, achieving both commercial success and critical acclaim. Many internationally recognized works by directors like Park Chan-wook and Bong Joon-ho, including Parasite, can be categorized as genre films.
Many experts emphasize that Korean cinema is no longer simply participating in the global film industry, but is increasingly helping lead with years of accumulated global recognition and industry influence.
That is good to hear. Young-eun, thanks for coming tonight. I hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
We're looking at mostly sunny weather through the long weekend starting tomorrow. But on Saturday, light rain of less than 5 millimeters is forecast for the east coast of Gyeongsang-Bukdo Province and Jeju Island. A few sprinkles may also develop across the capital area and Chungcheong-Namdo Province. Overall, rainfall will be quite light, so outdoor plants should not be significantly affected. We'll continue to see warm weather and a rising temperature trend over the coming days. Daytime highs on Sunday will reach around 27 degrees Celsius, and by Monday, temperatures will climb to about 30 degrees. Tomorrow, UV levels are expected to be high in many areas, so don't forget to wear sunscreen before heading outside. Tomorrow, Seoul will start the day at 15 degrees, Chuncheon at 12 degrees, Busan at 16 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 24 degrees. Daegu and Jeju will both top out at 22 degrees. Looking ahead, rain is expected to move across much of the country again on Tuesday. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
the main ingredient was
an in-depth studio discussion on AI, bio, climate, defense, and economy, the 5 key industries driven by Korea. We also examine how the 5 future strategic industries are bringing innovations to workplaces and everyday life. Focus on K initiative at the heart of change. A journey to find real beauty items, beauty on and off. Exploring how beauty is perceived across cultures and generations, and highlighting K-beauty culture from multiple angles. Idol group On and Off try the products themselves and come up with their own guidelines. The most honest beauty report you can trust. Beauty On and Off. Michelin star chef Fabrizio teams up with a traditional liquor sommelier to offer the most exquisite balance of tastes. Explore more than just recipes, but the rich layers of flavors, as well as the beautiful backdrops of breweries across the nation. Experience the Korean sentiments and the art of balance laid out on a table. Music for the ears as well as the eyes. Come closer to the riveting charm of K-pop. Experience the height of performance, style, and detail. An interactive music show calling out to K-pop fans around the world. Tune in to Simply K-pop, the trendiest choice for global fans.
Millennial and Gen Zs are reshaping the world. News Generation shares their fresh perspectives on what's trending now. From global developments to everyday culture, we're diving into the stories that matter. This is News Generation.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-kyeon. Samsung Electronics has narrowly avoided what could have become its largest ever strike after management and its union reached a dramatic last-minute deal over wages and bonuses. The agreement includes stock-based compensation, a new semiconductor bonus system, and the removal of bonus caps, but it is already sparking broader debate over performance pay, shareholder rights, and the long-term impact on investment in Korea's semiconductor industry. Meanwhile, concerns over slowing growth and rising household debt are building ahead of next week's Bank of Korea rate decision as the government rolls out a new national growth fund for industries including AI and semiconductors. Tonight, we take a closer look at those issues. And for this, we connect to Song Soo-young, professor of business and economics at Chungang University. A big welcome, Professor.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
And also joining us is Kwak Jun-hee, assistant professor of economics at Sagang University. Good to see you, Professor.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So like we've said, let's first start with Professor Kwak. Samsung Electronics management and labor reached a tentative wages and bonuses deal just before the planned nationwide strike. I wonder, how would you assess the overall deal?
Yeah, overall, I think averting the strike is a critical relief for the Korean economy. But if we look closely at the terms, I believe the deal was settled on somewhat favorable terms for the labor union. And I think this is because management clearly felt the immense pressure of a potential production halt. So they made significant concessions. However, the 4-point how to distribute bonuses across divisions remains a deep structural dilemma. It is practically impossible to calculate the exact contribution of a single division. For years, the massive astronomical capital investments required to grow the semiconductor division were heavily financed by the steady cash flows generated from the mobile and home appliance divisions. And I think because of this cross-subsidization, enforcing a strict when you kill division by division bonus model, ignores the internal financial ecosystem that have built the company, making feelings of unfairness inevitable.
So like Professor Kwak has mentioned, the agreement, it includes a new semiconductor bonus system and the removal of bonus caps as well. Now, while that could improve morale, some worry it may weaken Samsung investment capacity. Professor Song, how do you see this trade-off?
Yeah, as well explained, briefly explained by the Professor Kwak, and I believe that this becomes some calls for the attention of globally because seemingly the arch rival and who leads the exports and the GDP growth for South Korea, the two company has been looked at in comparison with how much they could earn for the labor workers in Samsung and the SK Hynix. Particularly, there are 3 features of the Samsung Electronics labor unions that deal with management of the Samsung is stock payment and then cash payment, and another finally is the overall performance incentive. So all these 3 features are considered, then the Samsung is turns out to be a little bit they win and they have get some better condition than the SK Hynix. The reason is because they could, as explained by Professor Kwak, Samsung could save the cash flow outflow from the company, particularly when even though the current super cycle of memory chip is very good, but it cannot last permanently at all. Therefore, when there is a downturn, actually the Samsung would be much safer, and they could they take the better position than SK Hynix.
So compensation and investment often move in opposite directions, and this is what we're seeing right now. So Samsung actually decided to pay some bonuses in company stock instead of cash, and some say this could better align employees with the company's long-term performance. Professor Kwak, what is the significance of this move?
Yeah, I think Professor Song have explained very well already, but in principle, giving stock instead of cash is a common way to get employees and owners on the same page. So when employees receive stock, they want the company's value to go up just as much as the management does. and they started thinking like owners in the long-term view. But beyond just giving stock, I think there is a very important rule in this deal. Employees can only sell 1/3 of their new shares right away. I think this specific limit has three major meanings. First, it keeps top-tier engineers from just taking their bonus and immediately leaving for a rival company. And if they want the rest of their money, they have to stay at Samsung. I thought that's a good thing. And second, I think it keeps them focused on the future. So they will work harder to increase the value of Samsung, for example. And ultimately, I think the semiconductor industry in a tough global race that costs billions of dollars. So by giving out stock with the selling limits instead of cash, I think Samsung can still reward its workers without emptying its bank account. So it allows the company to save its actual cash for what it needs most, investing in the newest chip technologies to beat global rivals.
Right. So it's also about aligning employee and company interests for the long term. So this latest event, it's really sparking a lot of attention across the country. Some expect this case to affect labor negotiations at other major Korean companies as well. Professor Song, what kind of impact could it have on bonus systems and labor management relations broadly?
Yes, since the outbreak of the pandemic and following ensuing the Iran war, and then when we observe the recovery of the economy around the world, it tends to show the divergence. The top-tier companies show strong recovery, whereas medium and small enterprise has been staggered a little bit and lagging behind. So that is also true to the case of the inside of the Samsung, because when there is a light, there always follows a shade. So in Samsung, there is a device solution division and the so-called device experience solution division has experienced quite contrast prospect about the performance payment. Particularly the Samsung the memory chip is very good, whereas the system, large-scale integration and processors and the foundry products are well lagging behind, because some memory chip, such as the supplier of the DRAM and the NAND flash memory, there are three competing big players are Samsung and the SK Hynix and the Micron in the US. Whereas the foundry products are usually almost provided by the TSMC. But right now, the foundry products are not performing good in Samsung Electronics. Therefore, there is a clearly very disparity between the labor workers who are currently in the memory chip, and on the other hand, there is foundry products and some large-scale integration. But this large-scale integration and the foundry products are quite related with the AI-related businesses and processes in the future. Therefore, clearly, this kind of current situation cannot continue to go permanently, and there is a reversion occurs. As a result, to that regard, as I mentioned earlier, Samsung they could endure a much better position than SK Hynix. That's my point. But however, this kind of the deal, government-mediated deal, could be also occurs among the small and medium enterprise. I don't think so, because this is the performance of the small and medium enterprise, as is will be explained later, but they do not show any meaningful and significant performance at all. So to that regard, we need kind of some government support for them. So it is too early to mention that this kind of Samsung Electronics government-mediated deal becomes a kind of some guideline or milestone for the other companies. I don't think so.
It's too early to say that, to generalize the current situation. Now, so this agreement right now, it still needs approval through a union vote, Professor Song, but some shareholder groups are already criticizing the size and the structure of the bonuses and even mentioning possible legal action. So could that become a meaningful variable going forward?
Currently, among the Samsung Electronics, the division, the device solution division of labor workers are very welcome the current government-mediated deal, and so, according to the reports, among the 50,000, more than 50,000, the eligible union workers, among them almost more than 30,000 people already cast a ballot. And then it will continue until the next Wednesday, May 27th. But I guess this will be approved, ratified by the union mostly, despite some kind of some grunt and complaint will come out within. Then this is currently the legal situation, legal action that is remarked by some shareholders, but that is most unlikely. The reason is because this kind of performance payment is, regardless of whether it is paid before the corporate tax or after after the corporate tax, then these employees who receive the bonus and payment are subject personal income tax. Then, from the companies or firms, owners and the shareholders' perspective, the net income is not affected at all, because this bonus and this kind of payment of wage in the form of wage, even though this, regardless of whether it is in the form of performance related, then that does not belong to shareholders' share. Shareholders are only eligible for the dividend payment, and that is absolutely determined by the executive officers in the board members of the company, and then those board members are supposedly selected by the shareholders in the annual meeting of shareholder. As a result, even though they claim that the shareholders should be allowed to cast approval of the company's policy, all they can do is exit selling shares or otherwise raise the voice to be heard in the annual meeting to change the directors in the board. So therefore, this is kind of just a threat without any meaningful significance.
So we'll have to see how it goes in the coming days. Yeah. But following this agreement, the tentative agreement, the Korean stock market has rebounded, and Samsung Electronics shares surged past the 300,000 won mark for the first time ever. Professor Kwok, do you think the agreement has eased some of the market's concerns?
Yes, I think it's clear that this agreement has significantly eased short-term anxieties in the financial markets because of the resolution of uncertainty. However, we must also consider the macroeconomic elements at play here. Even though the immediate internal crisis is resolved, but the broader macroeconomic environment remains challenging. So high interest rates, persistent inflation, and geopolitical risk continue to weigh heavily on overall demand. So therefore, the market can now refocus on Samsung's intrinsic value, such as its actual semiconductor earnings and technological competitiveness and so on. However, these underlying macroeconomic headwinds will continue to influence investor sentiment and the sustainability of this rebound.
Now, Professor Kwok, shifting gears, the National Growth Fund, one of President Lee Jae-myung's campaign pledges, has officially launched, and the goal is to channel public investment into industries like semiconductors, AI, and secondary batteries. How meaningful do you think is this policy initiative?
I'm actually quite optimistic and hopeful about the National Growth Fund's potential for success this time. First, this fund has the potential to fundamentally improve our financial market ecosystem by inducing retail investors to engage in long-term investment. Currently, a significant amount of retail liquidity in Korea is concentrated in short-term speculative trading. However, if the fund is structured transparently and offers reliable, attractive returns, I think it can successfully channel everyday investors' capital away from short-term volatility and into patient, long-term wealth building. And more importantly, I think we have to look at the powerful positive externalities this fund can generate. Strategic sectors like AI, advanced semiconductors, and so on, I think they can turn a profit with this fiscal support, and private markets often fail to provide enough patient capital for this. So the government's financial backing acts as a crucial bridge, observing all the risks and allowing these companies to focus on technological innovation.
What about Professor Song? Some people, they point to past policy funds that had ambitious goals but disappointing returns. What kind of risks should investors and policymakers watch most closely this time?
Considering our South Korea's economic size, actually, it is quite difficult to consider the size of the financial market and our economy size. It is very difficult to have such a JP Morgan or Morgan Stanley or something like such a big kind of investment banking or investment, the private equity fund, KKR, something like that. However, because this is supported and by the government, initiated by the government, kind of some material government sponsorship, because to guarantee some transparency and the same to devise the optimal investment strategy, who is in charge of the management of this fund. So there is a tax benefit, and there is potentially some loss buffering mechanism. So this draws a very explosive response from the investors, particularly retail investors are quite interested in. But what is a very risky portion is the lockup period is 5 years. So this means that there is for the investors to take out the money out of this fund. So this is typically the case in the such as a private equity fund who are very famous to make a long-term investment, and also hedge fund. So this is a kind of adoption of the investment banking and some private equity fund investment strategy to enforce the long-term investment. So I anticipate some kind of the over-the-counter, OTC or over-the-counter market will emerge to provide the liquidity, those among the investors who participate in this fund, but they need some kind of very prompt liquidity. So that is subject to huge discount, definitely. So that is why this is kind of risk appears. And also for the managers who is in charge of this fund, also there is a clawback, which means the performance is bad. They must pay back the earnings or their bonus payment. So to that regard, this is alignment of incentive. The managers is good, but even retail investors who are in the emergency situation in need of the liquidity or cash, they must bear the burden, or they must take responsibility for that.
It definitely seems to be the case. Now, Professor Song, we are expecting the Bank of Korea's Monetary Policy Board to meet on the 28th, which is just near from now. And with slowing growth and rising household debt both becoming concerns, what do you expect from this month's rate decision?
First of all, I think the interest rate will remain what it used to be at 2.5% of basic interest rate. Then the different countries face a different economic situation. even when we look at the foreign exchange rate change, against the U.S. dollar is even the Israel shekel and some Nigerian, Hungarian, Eastern Europe, such as Russia, they have shown strong gain against U.S. dollars. In the meantime, Japan, South Korea, and then in Philippines and the East Asian or Southeast Asian countries, currency has suffered from the loss against the U.S. dollars. Why this occurs? I believe this is a very short-term kind of oscillation or some kind of temporary very response. Because the reason is basically currently because of the Iran war, the situation for Russia and some kind of stunned countries, they are in the very advantageous position right now. Whereas Europe and East Asia countries a little bit suffered from the blockade and the supply disruption of the energy source. So that is why we have seen that change of the current exchange rate. That is caused by the outflow of the investors, primarily from the United States. They would like to find some much better place to make or to store their money for the time being. So I believe this is just a temporary, as long as our South Korean economy and Japan, because of Dakaichi, she announced that huge fiscal support for the economy. So what is now we have to consider some opposing part is growth or the stability or just for the favorable to the financial industry. I would like to bet on the growth is necessary for the small and the medium enterprise and the common people. So that's why I hopefully have some lower interest rate in the future, despite the possibility of a hike of inflation. But still, therefore, that is a kind of dilemma for the members of the Open Market Committee in the Bank of Korea. So that's why they continue to stay where it is right now.
So we'll have to watch closely on the Bank of Korea's message in the coming days. Thank you so much for your insights, Professor Song.
Thank you, as always.
And of course, Professor Kwok as well. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.
Whoever wears the crown must bear its weight. What did the weight of the golden crown mean to the rulers of Shilla 1,500 years ago? When it was first excavated, the golden crown was found flattened and folded into a cone shape, covering the face of the deceased. This dazzling artifact wasn't merely a funerary object placed to guard